So hello, my name is Carmen Puccio. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect here at AWS, and I'm joined with Mandus Momberg, who is also a Principal Solutions Architect. And in this module, we're going to explain to you how you can take the pet store application and deploy it into EKS, also known as the Elastic Container Service for Kubernetes. So Mandus, maybe you could show us the unique things about EKS and how to actually get our pet store deployment to work.
Yeah, sure. Let's get started on deploying this application into Kubernetes on AWS. But let's take a quick second to talk about the differences between EKS and ECS. ECS, of course, being our self-developed proprietary container orchestration system. And it's a very popular and very robust container orchestration system. But without a doubt, the open source community created the Kubernetes platform that has got a lot of traction and a lot of attention from many of our AWS customers. And in true AWS fashion, we listened to our customers and we created our managed Kubernetes service. And what we did is we wanted to stay as closely aligned with the upstream Kubernetes source as possible without needing to change any of the code inside of the code base. So we actively made the choice to just take the upstream source, and if we needed to make any changes to it, we would contribute that back to the open source community. So you can expect that any Kubernetes deployment on AWS, whether it's EKS or COPS or a self-deployed environment, will act the same way and you can manage it in the same way. EKS, of course, is the managed cluster service that we have. And therefore, you only have to worry about the worker nodes that you attach to that managed service. We take care of all of the heavy lifting around things like the masters and the etcd clusters that go along with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that same container image that we created and deployed to ECS, and we're going to create a Kubernetes manifest file. And we're going to take that manifest file and deploy it to an EKS cluster that we've already set up in our account. So let's take a quick look at the manifest file. So we're quite familiar with these type of resource definitions by this point. We did something in Docker Compose where we had a resource definition for a Docker Compose file. We had our task definition where we, in JSON, defined the environment for our application in ECS, and a manifest file does pretty much the same thing. So inside of this manifest file, we go ahead and we declare a couple of resources that we want the Kubernetes cluster to control and manage on our behalf. And it also becomes immutable because of this, because we have this single state that we can always deploy to as many Kubernetes clusters as we want in as many environments, and we can expect that they will always return the same experience. So a couple of things that we do is we want to have a persistent storage in this deployment where we attach the EBS volumes from our EC2 instances specifically to our Postgres deployment. So in this definition, we are going to define things like storage, load balancing, and our deployments for our application. So let's take a look at something like storage in this manifest file. At first, we're going to define the storage class and say that we want to have EBS volumes. And then we'll define how much storage we want to attach to a specific container. By doing this in the manifest file, we allow Kubernetes to also manage that resource on our behalf. So this allows us to deploy the container and Kubernetes to place that container on any EC2 node that is connected to the cluster and migrate that storage, that persistent storage, together with the container if the container moves around. That just helps us to make sure that our application stays always available and highly available. The next thing is we expose our applications as services. With inside of the Kubernetes ecosystem, most services by default get deployed only as internal services. We want to also be able to expose those services externally and communicate or have our customers communicate with those services in order to use them. We are going to have our Postgres database scale independently from our pet store application. And then we're going to have our application on pet store discover the Postgres service using the internal routing and DNS utilities that get managed and deployed in your Kubernetes cluster. We will then have Kubernetes attach our service to a load balancer that makes our customers capable of reaching our application using the internet. So we do this with a very simple command. We've defined our EKS manifest, and to simply deploy that to our cluster, we use the stock standard upstream kubectl tools, or some people might call it kubectl.
Yep.
Depends on what you like. I prefer to do kubectl. It always makes me feel warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
Kubectl. So I'm going to use kubectl and I'm running the apply command, and I expect that this will now tell the cluster the immutable state that I want my application to be in. And that is the state we already described. So you'll see all of these resources being created. I can now take my kubectl tool again, and I can point it to the namespace called PetStore. And I can do a describe in order to get the pods that will be running my application on my Postgres cluster.
So it's interesting you call out namespaces. So maybe you could explain a little bit about the difference between namespaces inside of Kubernetes versus namespaces in something like a container.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So namespaces is a very common term that comes up a lot in containers. And there's a difference between the namespaces that we refer to when we talk about task definitions in ECS and the namespace that I referred to right now. So the namespace that I refer to right now in Kubernetes is basically this virtualized isolation layer or a virtual cluster layer inside of your greater Kubernetes cluster. So think about it as an isolation layer where you might have multiple teams and you want to be able to deploy all of these different teams onto the same cluster infrastructure. So you can do that using a namespace where team A will deploy their resources like their pods and also their services inside of that namespace, but that's completely isolated from team B, which then could maybe reference it or look it up through the internal DNS records, but they don't necessarily have access to manage those resources or the permissions to manage those resources. In our task definitions in ECS, all containers that get deployed into that task definition shares the same namespace. And that's pretty important to know, because if, for example, our container application deploys the PetStore application and our database into the same namespace, you don't have to do anything special in order to have those two containers communicate with each other. You could quite simply just connect on the localhost port from the one container to the other container without complex routing or anything like that. And similarly, it goes for volume mounts as well, where you can actually have a local volume mount and then connect that to the two containers inside of the same namespace. So namespacing is an interesting concept that you can use in order to do things like sidecar containers in task definitions, where in EKS, you would use that namespacing as an isolation layer for all of the resources in that isolated version of the cluster.
Okay.
Right, so we brought up our pods inside of our PetStore namespace, and we can see that we have 2 front-end pods and 1 Postgres pod. And initially they were in a state of init where they were bringing up 0 of 1 containers, and the Postgres was in a container creating one. And now we can see that all 3 of our applications are running. Now we can also look at the services of our application, and we want to have some detailed information about those services because we want to see the ELB DNS name that is serving our application. So we ask the service or the cluster for our service, and we also tell it to output the wide view of that service, and there we get the full ELB DNS name for our application.
So that's interesting. So by deploying my manifest, you declared that you wanted a load balancer. Does Kubernetes and EKS actually create the load balancer for you?
Yeah, Kubernetes will go ahead and it'll create those resources for you, similar to the way that it created the EBS volume. And we'll talk about the EBS volume in just a second as well. And it'll set up all of the ports that you need to open and those type of things as well.
Awesome.
So if I just copy that DNS name and I open up a new browser tab and I open the DNS, you'll see our application running here. And right now, in the state it is, we only have 2 pods, but if I want to change that desired count, it's very simply a matter of me going into that manifest file that we spoke about earlier and me changing the replica count inside of that definition to maybe something like 3. And because this is immutable infrastructure, I can run that same kubectl apply command that we ran earlier, and I can just deploy everything at the same time. And you can see that it actually tells me that some things need to be reconfigured and has been changed. So if I now run that same request for pods that I did earlier, I expect, if everything went well, that there's 3 pods now running for PetStore. And indeed, our front end now is running 3 container or 3 pods inside of Kubernetes. So we recently added the ability to do the metric server and aggregated API layers inside of Kubernetes, which means that you can enable the horizontal pod autoscaler as well as cluster autoscaling on AWS, which means that that deployment can now become fully elastic. you can, based on metrics, scale out the number of pods that are serving your applications and then shrink them back down once the demand for that has.
So the same concept as traditional EC2 autoscaling, but now at the pod layer inside of Kubernetes.
Yeah, so it's actually at two places inside of Kubernetes, because you want to be able to manage the cluster nodes that actually handle the load of your containers, but you also want to be able to load balance the containers themselves and the pods themselves. And this is interesting because with the horizontal pod autoscaler, you could use that to shift between workloads during the day and the night. So if you schedule tasks to run for your web applications like we are, you would scale that out during days of high usage based on maybe requests coming in from your customers. And at night, when you are serving less requests, you can use the additional capacity inside of your cluster to do things like batch jobs and image processing, or maybe some security tasks that you want to do. And similarly, you can connect something called the cluster autoscaler to your cluster, which would add additional EC2 nodes and grow the full capacity and the ability to share more pods in that cluster automatically using metrics, and those same metrics that you would actually scale your HPA pods on. So they work very well together in that once the HPA understands that it needs to scale out and it tries to scale out and it fails because there isn't enough worker nodes, enough compute capacity, then the cluster autoscaler will pick up that request, provision the node required, and then HPA will take over and schedule the pods on the new worker node that was deployed. So at a fundamental layer, EKS and ECS really have very large similarities. It really just comes into the semantics of how you define the task as well as the manifest files. And you have a couple of additional resources inside of EKS that provides you a little bit more shippability around storage that's being attached to your cluster and how that's managed, and the integration into things like our load balance services and our IAM credentials as well.
All right, so another question, if I'm running Kubernetes on-prem and I've had my application running for a long time, maybe it's even the pet store application running on my on-premises version of Kubernetes, what does the experience look like to actually get it deployed into EKS?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. So if you have an application that's running on premises in Kubernetes already, and that cluster version that you're running on premises is the same version of Kubernetes that you've deployed into EKS, then it's a very simple process of just taking that same manifest file that you deployed on premises and deploy it into your EKS cluster. It should act the same way because it's immutable. And that opens up some really cool things, right? Like especially when we talk about automation and security, because now you can propagate automatically from one environment to the other environment. So you might, for example, use AWS's burst capacity during days that you have high load, and the automated pipeline will automatically trigger based on capacity requirements and just push your application in. And then maybe through a little bit of a service mesh discovery and some complicated DNS records, you can route traffic between both environments quite seamlessly. And then you can implement something like our Direct Connect service that gives you this really high-performing connectivity pipe between your data center on premises and your AWS environment. So Kubernetes is really this ideal positioning for you to deploy on premises and in the cloud at the same time, and pushing all of your infrastructure needs and your application needs idempotently from the one to the other.
All right, thank you for that. So hopefully you've learned a lot around how you could take your application. In this case, it's our pet store application, and you can get it deployed into AWS. Whether it be EKS, ECS, or Fargate, the important thing to realize is you as the developer now need to think about what it takes to get my application out into the wild. You need to work with your development teams, your security teams, your operations teams, and you need to think about all of the aspects around getting that application up and running, your build pipelines, and to be honest with you, once you work together as a holistic team, the rest really starts to fall into place.
Yeah, and that's very important that you actually treat these cluster resources as ephemeral, the same way you treat any other resource. That allows your developers to make the choice in a holistic fashion. You empower them in a holistic fashion. So deploying your clusters should also be done through something like a CloudFormation template, or maybe a Terraform manifest, or something like that, that will allow you to deploy the cluster and all of its applications together. Truly giving that application developer the freedom, but sticking with that prescriptive guidance on what the best practices, the security, etc., is.
All right, cool. So hopefully you've learned a lot around what it takes to get the application up and running. But as Amanda said, we really want to start thinking about how to automate our deployments. So in the next module, we're going to walk you through all of the components around getting that application built in an automated fashion. So follow the link below, and thanks for watching.